things aren't going so well for us over here in the UK, or broadly Europe at the moment. Things are going a lot better in America, though. And so I thought I'd do this segment about how we can have it so that the MAGA revolution, which when I was over in Washington, D.C. is well in swing, might cross-pollinate over to our side of the pond. But before we do that, we are selling the last of our Islander 2 merch, if you would like to go and pick some of that up. So some t-shirts, some mugs, some posters, etc. Before Islander 3 and its associated merch comes out, you can go over to uk.shop.lotuseaters.com. And I have been told to remind you that if you did have difficulties getting your Islander 2, 1, we've changed the distributor this time, so you will get Islander 3 properly. And 2, if you did have those difficulties, contact our support page over at Lotus Eaters and we'll try and get it sent out to you at our own cost, but because we want you to have the magazine. Anyway, I thought I'd get onto this because there's some new polling out from CBS, hostile news outlet and all that, but they and YouGov, through gritted teeth, admit that despite attempts to depict Trump as a dictator in waiting, and then he went on to win the popular vote, it turns out that people all over America are seeing him as energetic, strong, and keeping his promises. The most common phrases used for Trump are tough, energetic, focused, and effective.
Effective polling in the majority for a politician. That's unprecedented in recent times.
70% are saying he's keeping his promises.
That's huge.
Yeah, you don't...
And to be fair, he is, isn't he?
Yeah, he certainly is. He's doing more than he promised in that short space of time. Reminder, Keir Starmer and the Labour government are currently on 16% approval. Pretty big gap there. What's interesting, his deportation policy finds overall majority approval, just as most voters said they supported it during the campaign, and that extends to sending troops to the border. So marshalling the military down to the border, declaring a national emergency, slapping foreign criminals in shackles and sending them back to Colombia, etc., has overwhelming support from the American public, including all the foreign Uber drivers that I did a straw poll of. So just for those who are worried that mass deportations of foreign criminals are not within the Overton window, certainly is in the States, the most powerful country on the earth. And what's very interesting is my friend Nate Hockman has highlighted that this is particularly strong among Gen Z. So here's a screenshot of the approval ratings. Gen Z approve at a rate of 55 to 45. It's 52 to 48 for millennials, 56 to 44 for Gen Xers, who were the strongest constituency for Trump at the last election, 50-50 for boomers. American boomers are just a write-off. Like, you've got the peak
All
patriotic.
Are, yeah.
Well, you've got the ones that did like the boat parades for Trump, which is, endearing and cheesy, and it's kind of that Hulkamania style patriotism. And then you've got the ones that just want to relive Woodstock and are having orgies in the nursing homes, like Harry went over before.
I mean, to be fair, Hulk Hogan himself kind of straddles the line.
In more ways than one, yeah, true.
Ropes.
Fair point. So, look, the vibe has really truly shifted, and our collective enemies, we know that USAID funds these press outlets, which then report on Europe and the UK as well, keeping the Overton window in a very confined box. So whatever they say in America happens over here. They've also taken notice. So you've got these sort of seething, screaming hit pieces by Ben Rhodes, former Obama administration official, saying, this isn't the Donald Trump America elected. Well, it clearly is.
Actually.
Yeah, he's keeping his promises. And
This has been the one thing that they keep going to. They keep returning to this well of saying, nobody voted for this, and everybody who voted for Trump saying, this is exactly what I voted for, actually.
It's a terrible line. It's one of the worst things they could have done, really.
It's again, they just make him look really cool. It's the respectability principle.
Seen
right?
this embarrassed yet thing you literally voted for?
It's the Reagan's a Nazi. Bush is a Nazi, not like that nice Republican Reagan.
Well, yeah, now Reagan's the respectable Republican.
Yeah,
right?
and in 2016 it was Trump is a Nazi, not like the respectable Republican that we were calling a war criminal Bush. And now it's like Trump is a Nazi, not like that respectable Republican Trump in 2016.
To be fair to war criminal Bush, didn't he accidentally name himself as a war criminal once?
Yeah,
He's got a sense of humour about it.
Yeah.
I too think man and fish can coexist. Trump's executive order does not. So I'm coining something called the Conan principle. And what I mean by this is you can infer the level of winning directly from how much your enemies are driving themselves before you and wailing and gnashing their teeth. And they seem to be doing it pretty insistently in the New York Times. This seems to be the paper of disrepute at the moment. Here's another one. Musk's Lost Boys and Trump's Mean Girls by Maureen Dowd. In this, she writes, the president and the tech lord even have little progeny, little Elons, the Lost Boys of Doge, a gang of Gen Zers in jeans and with backpacks and bags of Doritos, bursting into federal agencies to gut them and force bureaucrats to justify their existence.
How do I join?
Exactly. The broccoli-haired Zoomov-offen are
too
just
old for it, actually.
That's true.
Yeah, I might just be a bit past it. Again, this from the party who thinks 16-year-olds can vote, who trotted out Greta Thunberg in front of the UN as an expert on climate policy. And
Didn't even go to school.
Quite. And who just appointed David Hogg vice chair of the DNC.
They also, as part of Kamala's thing, had all of those TikTok influencers try and come out for her. But
Harry Sissons.
yeah, Harry Sisson and the others, who now I'm told are in a Navy SEALs basement somewhere.
Quite, yeah. And she writes, the Lost Boys of Doge fit in well with the Mean Girls attitude of Trump's Washington. As seen here in this very famous piece and this image where they tried to make us look awful, but, they just picked all the attractive people.
I mean, the people here, compared to America more generally, are more clean-cut, more in shape, more presentable.
Happier.
Oh,
what's
how terrible.
Funny is
And that one in the black tie
Whiter.
actually looks like you, Josh.
I'll take that.
He looks a bit like you.
He's a more handsome version, to be honest.
Oh, very modest.
Originally, this image was sort of slightly cropped because they cut the black guys out of it on the left to say that this is an entirely white party. Bear in mind, this was organised by C.J. Pearson and my friend Chris Barnard. I was at this party. It was good fun for a while. And C.J. Pearson himself is an African-American gentleman. So, yeah, the idea that this is just...
Well, the problem was happy white people.
Yeah, quite.
That was literally the problem. See, as people were sharing other photos from this, where a few of those girls, especially that one who looks like she's in her nightgown, were all hanging out and smiling together, and people were actually posting pictures of women from the Third Reich, saying, "Oh, it looks the same to me." It's like it's just happy white people. That's what really annoys some of you. I wonder why.
It might annoy the writer in question. For context, this is it.
What the hell is that?
That was defeated at the ballot box in November. I wonder why they might be envious of these women.
That thing
photo.
going, none of you ever voted for this. You didn't vote to be happy.
That person was calling them the mean kids, were they?
The cruel kids.
Cruel
I'll read an extract from the article because it's appallingly written. It's easy to see the festivities as an obnoxious victory lap of the MAGA coalition. And of course they are. They're referring to two parties, by the way. This one and then one earlier, the following day in Butterworth's, a sort of watch party from American Moment. I posted a photo of it. Everyone was attractive, happy, and wearing MAGA hats. It was jubilant. They say conservatism as a cultural force, not just a political condition, is back in a real way for the first time since the 1980s. But here in DC, among the tourists from Tampa, the donors, and the last politicians Trump wimped into submission, one can also witness the emerging influence of a newer type of conservative. They are not disenfranchised or working class or anti-elite or many of the other adjectives used to describe Trump supporters since 2016. Rather, they are young, imposingly well-connected, urban and very online. They are rebels once again storming the Capitol Hill, though without the pathetic scariness of January 6 rioters. They are crypto nerds and influencer girlies and recent Make America Healthy Again converts and gays of all stripes, plus your standard fare, seething, Rogan listening bros. Few of them would call themselves Republican unless they be
Sorry,
tarred
is the main complaint that there are loads of gays that aren't attracted to this writer?
Yes.
No, I thought so.
I mean, I can see why you're at this party with this description now.
Thanks.
Not the gay part.
No, definitely.
The always online.
Yeah, cheers, thanks. No, just keep digging. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
At least I had the guts to call him gay, Josh. Come on.
I mean, he did hold my hand earlier, so
That's
you've
true.
indicted yourself.
You know, it takes one to know one.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm only.
Oh, I've just dobbed myself in.
Point being, the reason I say this is appallingly written isn't actually because it's a badly written article. It's because this was written to make us, let's say us collectively, transatlantic, look terrible. And what's fascinating is now they're coping and seething, being an accurate depiction of us. Makes us sound great. So this was meant to be a hit piece, and it just coded as an endorsement. Like, yeah, funnily enough.
Same with Byline Times.
Quite, exactly. Kamala Harris's promise of being brat, which means having your mascara streamed and doing a walk of shame home straight into a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic, didn't appeal to attractive, non-demented young women and the men who quite might like to marry them one day. Turns out that being attractive and financially successful and having children was a better sales pitch. Weird that you would just concede that ground, guys. Anyway, so the UK is looking on in envy at the moment. Speaking of mass deportations, overwhelmingly supported by Gen Z, The Telegraph did a great comparison piece between Trump's deportations and the UK's deportations, spelled Y-O-O-K-A-Y. This is Trump's deportations, taking foreign criminals, slapping them in shackles and putting them aboard a military aircraft. This is the UK's high-vis health and safety deportations, where you've got 9 people for every 1 illegal immigrant. And by the way, the overwhelming majority of these deportations that Labour are boasting about, it's over 16,000, they are voluntary returns, which means they get a £3,000 stipend after breaking the law just to bugger off home. And it doesn't stop them from breaking back in, either.
I prefer Josh's idea if we seize their assets.
Yeah.
Tax remittances, 95% as well.
You know how in 2020 we would hear about how cramped all those ships were? You know what I mean? Very cramped conditions, 400 people to a boat. I would be okay with that if it meant we could send people back.
Anyway, funnily enough, lots of people probably agree with you, because now the overwhelming majority of the British public actually back Trump's policies too. So it's not just he's popular in America, but let's say if there were a party in Britain looking to emulate the MAGA revolution, they could just copy everything that Trump did. So this is 2,000 voters surveyed, and the questions were fairly clear. They laid them out here, but I'll summarise the results. 58% of the public support mass deportations, so that's very encouraging. So that is well within the Overton window of acceptability. 53% support ending DEI and restoring free speech protections, and 55% support fracking and North Sea drilling, ending net zero. So ironic that these were all the policies that terminated Liz Truss's tenureship. Turns out you can probably just copy the policies but not resign, and and also clear out the civil service while you do it so you can actually do the policies, and you'll be fine.
I like how we live in an alleged democracy, whereas the government is doing the opposite of all of the popular things.
Well,
that would be populism, which would be fascism.
Other than
Populism is bad.
maybe like 7 MPs, every single party is doing all those things as well. Like, you've just been given a Hobson's choice for absolute decades. And therefore, no wonder Zoomers are not too enthused with democracy, as we've covered before. But of the people supporting this, you might be thinking, well, America's Zoomer revolution is unique to them, right? We haven't had the same infrastructure or the same culture. Well, you say that. 1 in 3 Brits would vote for Trump. Now, that's good. That's pretty encouraging. I mean, Reform was already the joint top party in its infancy with young men at the last election. And now we've got polling that says more young men would actually vote for Trump than Farage, I assume on pure mimetic quality as well.
I think also that Trump has proof that he's going to deliver on his promises, whereas I think that the main concern with Nigel is that the association with the Conservative Party, the talk of Conservative defectors and potential pacts makes people think that they're going to go the same way as the Conservatives and stab their base in the back.
I think there shouldn't be as much of worry about pacts, because just speaking anecdotally, Reform really hate the Tories, but they're very happy to allow lots of Tories to wear a teal tie if they just renounce their former Tory membership. Like that Conservative MP they announced like it was a famous football trade. He had previously stood in the seat against Rupert Lowe in the 2019 election when he was a Brexit Party MEP. And when Rupert magnanimously stood down in the non-aggression pact against Boris, all he did was badmouth him. So weird that you take him aboard.
It needs to be more radical than just saying that, I'm not part of the party. It needs to be Maoist. It needs to be... You need to denounce everything that your party did. You need to be harangued and harassed in a large public forum until you understand the shame of what your party did. Then maybe we'll consider it.
Perhaps
after you've got done
like
with your hard labour.
A guy of Boris Johnson and burn it in public.
Well, this is one.
Burn an effigy of Johnson for every Tory to Reform move over.
So about 2 weeks before Andrea Jenkins joined Reform, or maybe it was a couple of months. Anyway, I spoke to her about this, and she said Reform had been courting her defection before the election, and since she's now their mayoral candidate for Greater Lincolnshire. And I like Andrea. She's always been a pretty solid Brexiteer, good on migration. But when I pressed her, she said that she wanted Priti Patel to win the Tory leadership election, and that she still defends Boris Johnson's COVID decisions. And other than if Priti Patel hadn't gone on The Sun the other week and defended the Boris wave and told us to all apologise for the Infinity Indians she's dropped on us, which she called living bridges to the Modi regime, in a Foreign Affairs Select Committee.
And then there was Kemi Badenoch's incredible trigonometry interview.
Yeah, which everyone should watch. If Priti Patel hadn't have defended that, would she have been taken in as a defector? That's a genuine question. So reform needs to be a lot more stringent about who they let in so it doesn't just track Tory. I agree. And so Trump is perhaps looking like a more mimetic, but also politically strong figure. And so they need to match the Trump energy. We might be getting onto that in a bit. So Zoom is
with this as well, this headline, the 1 in 3 British young people would vote for Trump. I wonder if it would be an even greater percentage if they would to separate the British young people from the British young people.
Yeah, we don't have an ethnic and gender breakdown.
No, we never do.
Which is funny because we do for literally everything else except polling, which is really
I think
annoying.
polls need to start doing that because there's such discrepancies in the British subjects, should I say.
Well, here's a perfect example. It's this Times polling that we actually discussed on New Culture Forum that's coming out soon, which is that 41% of young people today are proud to be British, 15% believe the country's unified, 48% believe that Britain is a racist country, 50% believe the UK is stuck in the past. I mean, if you're trying to get a house like me, you might be sympathetic to thinking that. 11% would fight for Britain, 41% said there were no circumstances in which they would take up arms for the country. This is compared to in 2004 when 80% of young people said they were proud to be British, which is almost twice as much as today, and 60% said the country was united compared to 15% now. I mean, the united aspect just means that we've got more political choice, whereas Blairism just gives you a Hobson's choice between two cheeks of the same backside. But what is interesting here is a quote that I've pulled out from this from a one Summer Nesbitt. It's very revealing that this polling doesn't interview any of the broccoli-haired, disillusioned white guys that are more likely to vote Trump than anyone else, right? Summer Nesbitt says this: "We don't learn about black history, but we were built on racism. It's not right to say we aren't racist. It might not be blatant, but it's systemic racism, deeply entrenched unconscious bias." She's saying that about the UK.
Who's this person?
Summer Nesbitt. She's half Indian, half Jamaican.
Support.
Okay. Careful. Anyway, point being, she says this: Britain was built on racism. That's just a rote-learned American talking point. Like, we never had chattel slavery. Hengist and Horsa weren't sub-Saharan. Africans didn't build Hadrian's Wall. So she's brought that sort of cross-pollination of American race politics over to here, probably from social media and the UK education system. So can we cross-pollinate the American Cultural Revolution back in the inverse?
Well, there wasn't any racism in Britain, going back 300 years because it was all British. There was no one. Well, maybe it was directed at the Scots from the English and vice versa, but it was all domestic racism, therefore okay.
She's just a fifth columnist who wants the entire politic of Britain to be revolving around giving her free things.
Well, this is
benefiting her particular ethnic groups.
This is the interesting part. Nesbitt is half Indian and half Jamaican, as it's printed here. So she doesn't identify as British. She identifies as separate, a mix of separate ethnicities. Yeah, quite. So the ethnic and gender breakdown that isn't provided here is very important. Why don't Gen Z like democracy? Why do they think it's a racist country? Why don't they trust the police? Well, there are three factions, right? There are these second generation, third generation migrants who might think that Britain is a racist country because they don't see Britain as their country because their parents are not British or from Britain, ethnically or culturally or whatever. And so they just accuse it of racism by rote learning American talking points. There's another subset of that diverse diaspora who don't like democracy because they want a caliphate. And that's a very real thing, given Mohammed is now the most prominent baby name in England, and a third of British babies are born to non-British mothers. And then there's, of course, the, let's say, woke students, largely young women in this country, who have just bought the British values rendition of history that the empire is uniquely guilty for slavery and racism that they've been fed. But then the other demographic is someone who would agree that Britain's a racist country. They would agree they don't trust the police. They would agree democracy isn't very good. It's young white guys like us who are like, yeah, Britain is a racist country against me because of DEI and the Equality Act. Yeah, I don't trust the police because the Macpherson report said the police were systemically racist. And now anytime I put a tweet out saying, don't really like the level of foreigners playing their phones out loud on public transport, I get a non-crime hate incident. So I think we're all watching the same TV screen, just coming to different conclusions, and we're not told which groups are saying what. I mean, as a social psychologist, you must be bloody tearing your hair out on this methodology.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. Like, I've long said that the people that go into political polling quite often are the people who failed in academia and so aren't, worth their stripe. And even in academia, you've got to have multiple studies to verify a trend. So it's just like the lowest of the low most of the time. Not that I'm bitter or anything.
Yeah, we're getting the dregs of democracy over in the UK, but something that's funny, right, is that in the European continent and in the US, you're not getting the same disenthusiasm with democracy. And it's because in the US, it's worked for them. in Europe, some of them are starting to cotton on. So this is the AfD in Germany. And reminder, their national election, if you are German and you fancy voting, is on the 23rd of February 2025. Now, there are some reservations about the AfD, mainly because Alice Veld herself is quite a liberal person, but there you go.
She's got an interesting life.
She's a lesbian married to a Sri Lankan woman, I think, isn't she? I could be wrong there. But so she's not quite the ambassador of the far right. Woo! But at her conference, and this was at the Saxony conference, January, I think it was the 13th of January this year, Wiedel said to the party, I have to be honest with you, if it's going to be called remigration, then that's what it's going to be, remigration. And so she's adopting the pantsuit girl boss position, because President Trump, of course, used the phrase remigration to refer to the mass deportation of the millions of illegal criminals let in via the southern border under the Biden administration. So it seems that the AfD are actually hardening up their migration policy and catching up with the Trump revolution. And now it looks like they're in with a chance to win, mainly because lots of young men, as the BBC are petrified of this, are turning to, they say the far right, but this is the AfD.
They're a liberal party first and foremost, aren't they?
They're very market liberal, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
But they have a national preference policy, as do National Rally, as should Reform UK, because the obligation of the state should be to its citizens, and its citizens are a particular people, otherwise the country doesn't exist. So they interview a chap here called Nick, who's 19, and Dominic, who's 30. One reason why Nick and many other German men say that they are concerned about immigration is because they're afraid of the number of attacks in Germany involving suspects who are asylum seekers, most recently the fatal stabbing of a toddler and a man in a park in the Bavarian city of Schaffenburg. I wonder why he might be afraid of that. Perhaps the Christmas market as well attack. There seems to be a sort of trend stacking up here. Must just be racism on his part. He says, the people who integrate and learn, who study here, do their work, I have no problems with them. And he says, but these days, such statements are seen as hostile. You're called a Nazi because of Germany's past. Yeah, he's not looking to kick out the Japanese businessman who's married to a German woman and actually contribute taxes. It's just all of the, stabby Afghans that might be a bit of a problem. Hence why Pew Research found in 2024, 26% of German men had positive views of the AfD compared to only 11% of women at the time. And the share of men holding this opinion has risen 10 points since 2022. In September 2024, when they had their regional elections, I think it was in Thuringia, and I can't remember the other place off the top of my head.
Saxony-Anhalt?
Thank you, sir. 1 in 3 Germans under the age of 34 voted for the AfD. So we're seeing comparable levels of support from Zoomers, as we did in America, for now the German equivalent, although they might be a little bit softer than Trump, even. One of the reasons why the BBC attributes this to is that the AfD dominates TikTok compared to other German parties. It has 539,000 followers on its parliamentary account compared to 158,000 for the SPD, who have the most seats in the German parliament. One AfD influencer called Selina Breitschy, is 25-year-old, has more than 167,000 followers, 53% of whom are male, with 76% aged between 18 and 35. Now, they say 53% of male. That means near parity. Women are following her. We've seen a similar trend over in National Rally for the French, where almost an equal split of young men and young women are voting for Le Pen's party, maybe because they think Jordan Bardella is a bit dishy, but also because they've turned immigration into a women's safety issue and snatched up loads of the French feminists. So we're seeing an encouraging wave across Europe of young people copying the same trends as in Trump. All fun. And here's one last one. Denmark. Now, Denmark is a good case study. Because if Alice Wiedel was trying to model herself on pantsuit deportations, well, the Danish centre-left, of all places, have been doing this since 2019, and they've pursued some pretty radical hardline policies that are actually now just sensible and mainstream and the way that you deal with the problem of criminal asylum seekers. So in 2018, Denmark introduced the so-called anti-ghetto law to reduce the number of non-Western residents in certain areas to below 30% by 2030. It's the only 2030 goal I endorse. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, who's leader of the Social Democrats, has pursued a zero refugee policy since 2019. Ms. Frederiksen told the Financial Times in 2024 that the country's approach to crime and immigration, including revoking residency permits for Syrian refugees in 2021 and 2023, now that the war's won, they can all go home, I suppose, was popular with left-wing working-class voters. She said, an unsafe society is always a bigger challenge for people without a lot of opportunities. If you have the money, you will always be able to defend yourself. Last year, the authorities granted the smallest number, and that's only 2,300 residency permits to asylum seekers that we have seen in recent years. This is Kare Divbad Beck. apologies if I mispronounced that, who's the immigration minister. Whereas here, let's use a comparison, the Home Office figures in the UK, which have a population more than 10 times that of Denmark, granted 67,978 asylum claims in the year to June 2023 to 2024, which is more than triple the previous years. So Europe's Zoomers are just sort of hoping for a fraction of what the Americans and Europeans have got. And the only glimmer of hope is that we have Rupert Lowe retweeting fan cams of his speeches now. So perhaps we have our Trump in waiting. We'll have to see.
Hi folks, thanks for watching. If you would like more from us and you would like to support us and help keep the lights on, go over to lotuses.com and watch Toners and Talks, Connor's latest show about, and this is a very detailed breakdown of the Southport massacre and what happened there. It's very, very comprehensive, and it's one of those things that gets worse and worse and worse the more you hear about it. And then go and follow us on X at lotuseaters_com, and we'll see you next time.